My name is Dom Douglas, and I've been playing Magic the Gathering for what seems like forever, but in fact it's only been on and off for about 30 years. With that comes an expectation that I'm the best player ever. You couldn't be any more wrong in that statement. What I do like, however, is having a lot of fun. Whether it be playing Limited, Draft, Commander, Standard when I get the chance, Arena, Magic the Gathering Online, it doesn't matter as long as a good time is had. And with that, I have some opinions, not just of Magic the Gathering, but also video games, comics, maybe even a TV show or two. This is the Goblin Grenade Podcast. The big news, the main topic today is going to be Path of Exile. I was also going to say stuff about Magic the Gathering. Tarkir is out on Arena. Enjoy it. I enjoyed pre-release weekend. No deck tech video this week. Instead, it'll be me unboxing, so to speak, a bundle of Aether Drift. Cracking a bunch of Aether Drift packs from the bundle. And we'll do that on Thursday. Tomorrow, actually. Today's podcast, though, we're going to talk about Path of Exile 0.2.0, and it's probably going to be the first negative podcast I do. To the point that last night, after I was done playing the weekend-long opening, I was collecting thoughts on it, and some part in this video is going to be me from that time. It was literally at 10 o'clock at night, Monday, April 7th. And I'd played basically 2 hours on Friday, 10 hours on Saturday, 10 hours on Sunday, and a couple more hours on Monday. And yeah, I don't get the vision yet. I want to. I'm still playing, but there's a lot of things that went wrong. And I'm going to try to not repeat myself because the next segment's going to be 40-something minutes of me collecting my thoughts. And I thought it was going to be a little bit more positive. I will say this. Dawn of the Hunt dropped on Friday. I'm not going to talk about the technical issues that happened. That is given on first. This is an early access game. Game's not officially out yet. Second, GGG, Grinding Gear Games, I'm going to refer to them as GGG for the rest of this video, have done a great job in fixing these errors, crashes, and stability issues, and graphical glitches. They've been on it, which is atypical because if I'm not mistaken, they are a New Zealand-based company, and they're really not in the office on weekends. And it's a skeleton crew, and they did their best, as my dog goes ape outside for some reason, and I'm keeping that in. He's probably barking at his owner that just came home. So, gameplay-wise, well, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to do what happened. Okay, big 0.2.0 patch. That means this game's not official yet. All right, remember, it's early access. They changed everything. Everything that existed in the game was nerfed in some way, shape, or form. It didn't matter if it was a build that almost nobody was using. Everything was nerfed to stop the blasting of this game. I blasted on my second, halfway through the second playthrough of my second character, which was a witch, doing ice walls into fireballs and chaining those explosions into more fireballs. My first was Archer. First class, my starter build was the Archer. And I got in late because I could only start playing in late January, and it came out in December, so a lot of things have been figured out. But the Archer, I did every single piece of thing. I did every side quest. I did everything in the first 3 acts, and then in the next 3 acts in Cruel, which the Cruel difficulty is just the first 3 acts repeated. Then you get into the end game of maps. So I played a lot of it. I definitely played a lot of it, and I enjoyed it. Still rough. I definitely wasn't picking the tier class, but this was focused on everybody towards the end of 0.1, which I think was called the New Beginning. The Discovery or something like Discovery season, I could tell people were blasting through things. Like at the third character I played, which was the warrior monk melee build, which was terrible. I had fun with it, but man, it was rough playing melee classes. And then the fourth character I rolled was going to be my starter build for Dawn of the Hunt. It was going to be a witch minion build, which basically has a bunch of skeletons around that do the fighting for me, and I occasionally throw gas bombs at them and set them on fire and let all the other things do the work. The reason being, this was a starter build for me to get to endgame with minimum cost, so I don't have to spend currency in the game of exalted orbs and divination orbs and regal orbs and all these chaos orbs and, you know, the soul of Takati stuffs, and just gather a bunch of them for my eventual real class. And I was waiting for maybe like 2 or 3 weeks for build guides to start being populated a little bit more. The problem with it was, and this is probably me experiencing this for the first time in Path of Exile 2 and 1, because I started playing 1 very late into its cycle when it came out on Xbox One. So you could always have really decent starter builds day one that you can go to Maxroll or you can go to other websites or Mobalytics and just get a really good build. Because this game is very complicated. Very, very complicated. You do not want to go in blind. You will not have a good time. You need to at least have a game plan of some sort. And none of us knew how much everything was nerfed, to the point that the minions that I played from late Friday night into like Monday, into Sunday, it was dreadful. It was rough. Everything was not doing enough damage, and I'm not playing the tier builds. I'm not playing the broken builds. I wasn't playing the obviously broken stuff that happened. So I wasn't blasting. I was actually getting blasted. So Act 2 normal boss, Jamma, I got stuck on for like 3 hours. And at that point, I made the decision to respec into an Essence Drain Lich Witch build, which has been doing great. I like it. It's a little... You definitely have to pay attention to every fight that you get into, and you have to be smart about it. You can't blast anymore, and I appreciate that. More thought is being put into combat. The problem was, in the beginning, all the monsters were super, super jacked up, while we all got super nerfed. So, eventually they released a hotfix to lessen the monster health to make it a little bit less grindy and a little bit more combat-y, but it still wasn't working for most classes. And then a day after switching to the Essence Drain build, they kind of fixed minions, and I thought about going back to it, but I was looking at it and going, I think it's a little too late. Because also, I had to spend 3 hours grinding for gold to be able to afford the respecking of my class. That was on me. And my original plan for this was, too, also not to do an ascendancy for the starter build. So eventually I could, after, playing maps so long that I have millions of gold, that I could, totally respec the class to something different. From minions to, maybe what eventually would become the Essence Drain build. So there was that. Now, the thing I do appreciate about it's hard. It's Diablo 2 Day 1 hard. Okay? Not Resurrected, the original Diablo 2 hard. Maybe even shades of Diablo 3 Day 1 hard. And if you know what I'm talking about, you know how hard Diablo 3 was when it first came out, especially with the drops. The drop rate has been reduced as well. And I think a lot of people weren't expecting that we were going to be gifted a whole bunch of stuff to test out in the first season and then have it taken away. A lot of us weren't expecting that. Even so, I'm in Act 2 Cruel, with my first and only build so far. And I finally encountered my first unique strongbox and my first exile fight. And both of these things dropped almost nothing that I was using. Everything that got dropped in that unique strongbox and the rogue fight, which is a new fight that you will encounter, like a mini boss fight of a random rogue, which was what you are, but they are kitted out in full gear, and when you beat them, they drop all their gear, and you get to pick it up. Everything this rogue dropped, I think I saved the bow for maybe future archer use, but everything else was just transmuted into currency. I think Orbs of Alteration, Transmutation, and I think I got a Regal. So the drop rates are lower. Everything, the uniques, I've encountered 3 of them. 3 uniques. A lot of us weren't expecting that, and GGG wasn't really forthcoming with that particular nerf to drops as well. It has made me pay attention to fights, which is great. Big detriment, though, those end act boss fights shouldn't take me 10 minutes to complete the boss fight or get 90% of the boss fight done and then get one-shotted. Because I, once again, made a mistake and goofed up on the controls or just lost focus for half a second and I'm dead. The other thing that wasn't addressed was how... The other thing that they didn't tell us was stun was going to be an issue. We were going to get stunned, sometimes stun locked to death. And this wasn't explained to. So now we have to look at stun thresholds on our gear as well, on top of fire resistance, cold resistance, lightning resistance, and chaos resistance when you get to the cruel difficulty. And this game's already hard enough to the point that if you put it like once you get past Act 1 in both normal and cruel, you get a resistance penalty. And by the time you get done Act 1 cruel, you now have minus 40 to all your resistances. The lightning, thunder, the lightning, fire, and cold. So your natural out the gate resistances to those are minus 40. So now not only do we have to look at this for our gear on top of every other piece that we need to make the builds work, we also now need to worry about stun thresholds. We are getting inflicted with more poison, more freezing, more water-based drownings, more just being incinerated, bleed, because they want us to focus on using charms, which would be okay if you could have more than one charm equipped. But most belts only have one slot for a charm. And if you get lucky, you get 2 and 3. Super lucky is 3 charms. So you can off-gate 3 at maximum, and that's if you're lucky. Most of the time, you only get to mitigate 1. Now, I like this. The other end of that is me liking this because now I have to worry about boss fights. And if this is a fire-based boss, all right, I need to put my fire ring on. I need to put my fire charm on. I need to make sure that I have enough resistances for this fight to last. That I enjoy. I don't enjoy the original brutality of getting to these boss fights because it was tough. It was rough to get to there. Act 1 normal Gregor took me about an hour to beat. And pro tip, if you're stuck on Gregor, stop what you're listening to in the background, turn up whatever volume you have playing, and listen, because when Gregor does the enshrouding you in cold, and you only have that limited space, and you got wolves, and he comes out, at the end of every line he says, dodge roll. And you will completely dodge his attack. I like that mechanic. I like that in that boss fight. I don't like the fact that boss fight takes 10 minutes. Jamma, once again, got stuck really bad. And then once I respec'd into that and got some better gear on the cheap, basically I was like, hey, +2 to... I bought for like an Exalt Orb, a wand, and I was looking for more damage spells and +2 chaos damage. And I got one great for an Exalt Orb with +2 to chaos, and that has been amazing. I geared out again in the middle of Act 3, normal. And the final boss fight in that Doriani, I was able to beat first try. Paying attention, took about 5 minutes because I'm just doing damage over time, and I just keep pouring that damage over time over and over and over. Act 1 Gregor fight in Cruel took me a couple tries. But it wasn't for lack of this boss is unfair. It was more like I was the idiot who didn't dodge roll in time, or I was the person who didn't obviously see the AoE effect going on underneath me. So they've done some good things, but I think the biggest point of contention before we hit to the next part of the video is GGG didn't let us know about the vast majority of these changes. And these changes came from the skills and the items themselves. And even the skill tree was nerfed as well, to a certain extent. They took out the gem sockets in the skill trees because people were just jamming in like 6 sockets and getting even more power. Remember, though, it is an early access game, and I had to remember this too, because I was getting pretty frustrated. And then I was like, oh yeah, that's right, this game's not even officially out yet. It's early access. It's the first day of launch of the new season. I'm not even mad. I was never mad at the technical issues that went on. It was more so the mass amount of nerfs and the overpowering, what it seemed like to even just common trash mob enemies. So now we're going to go back to past Dom, late last night Dom, after compiling all my notes on the weekend as well. Those are disjointed a little bit, but please stick around to hear what I had to say in the moment, if you will. This section of the podcast was recorded the day before I actually do the real podcast, or the rest of it. It is Monday, April 7th, and basically, I'm just about done playing Path of Exile 0.2.0, Dawn of the Hunt patch. I just got into quote-unquote Act 4, Act 1 and Cruel. My adventure, my gameplay experience has not been atypical. My starter build was going to be witch minions, and up until a certain point I was jamming a square peg in a circle, but we will get to that in a bit. But the long story short version, if you will, of so far the first 3 days-ish of Path of Exiles Dawn of the Hunt season has been one of the most controversial things Grinding Gear Games from this point forward in this section will be referred to as GGG has done. It is not unanimously, but it is overwhelmingly disliked by the mass majority of the playing. There are some people who like it. There are people like me who are I don't like a lot of things this patch has done, but I do like what it's trying to do. It is going to be very scattershot because this has been a very scattered shot time for GGG as well. The patch dropped on Friday. Wasn't able to play it until I got home from pre-release for Dragons of Tarkir. Tarkir Dragonstorm, I mean. Dragons of Tarkir was like 10 years ago. Got home at around 8 o'clock at night, started playing Path of Exile, and just kind of knew something was off. It didn't feel right. My starter build was barely functioning in the beginning of the game, and me, along with a lot of other people, were having a very difficult time. Some people have said that this is almost as bad, if not worse, as the Path of Exile 1 Lake of Calandra League. If you are not familiar with that, Lake of Calandra, it was so hated, and GGG got so much public flack that was the patch that they kind of stopped interacting with the community of Path of Exile 1. Before you could actually reach out to some of the developers of the game, especially at GGG, and Calandra was so outrageously hated, and they got such vitriol thrown their ways that they just said it's not worth it. We're not interacting with the community anymore. In the future, it's just going to be the community post for GGG. Like, anonymity at its finest. So the patch drops, people start playing. And we got the patch notes a day before. Okay, that's weird. Not atypical for GGG, but still a little weird. Every single... we knew some nerfs were happening, a bunch of nerfs were happening. We didn't realize every single piece of item, every single skill gem, every single ability was nerfed. Everything got touched. Even skills that were maybe only being used by 5% of the players, and not even those skills that those players were using were broken in any way, shape, or form, where they were blasting through endgame content. If you had a class, if you had a build, if you even had a starter build like I did, witch minions, everything got nerfed to some varying degrees, from heavy to, oh my god, this is unplayable. Some of the quotes that I've heard about this, one was from Zizarin, a very predominant member of the streaming Path of Exile 2 community and Path of Exile 1. The monsters are playing Path of Exile 1 as we, the players, are playing Path of Exile 2. What does that mean? Well, the monsters are moving lightning fast still in Path of Exile 2. The combat in Path of Exile 2 for the player is slower. They want a more combo-heavy focused playstyle. They want a more thought-provoked, if you will, more thought put into combat than just splash, 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 which I get. Diablo 4 gets to be somewhat mindless when it comes to combat. Diablo 3, for me, infinitely mindless because I'm a whirlwind barbarian. I literally hold right trigger, spin to win, no thought goes into it. Diablo 2, however, tons of thought get put into it. But the enemies are still moving lightning fast, so they will combo break you in the middle of your combo like it's a fighting game and wreck your stuff completely. And the problem is that along with everything being weakened and nerfed, they made the monster stronger. So not only are we hitting lighter, but the monsters have a bigger health pool. This was the start of it. This was Friday into Saturday morning. For this, some of these events are going to take, most of these events are going to take place in between Friday and Saturday morning. Okay, Friday 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to Saturday 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. All right. So, a lot of people knew that something, as I said before, wasn't feeling right about combat. And it was basically exposed within an hour or two that everything got weakened. Even items, even weapons. Uniques got weakened. Everything in the game that existed before in patch 0.1 was weakened in 0.2. And I get the feeling that GGG knew they messed up with the patch notes, because the patch notes came out 2 days, if that, before the launch. And typically these notes come out a week or so around GGG. When they announced Dawn of the Hunt, they were supposed to announce all the patch notes as well, and they said, due to something that happened and internal stuff, we can't release it until later on. Later on being less than 48 hours before launch. And in those patch notes, they hardly touched on the new gems and the skills and even uniques. So in essence, the community could not theory craft at all. And in a game as complicated as Path of Exile 2 and Path of Exile 1, theory crafting helps the standard casual pleb players like myself. I play a lot of Path of Exile and Path of Exile 2. I'm by no means an expert at it. But I do know to look up a build guide at least for the beginning of the seasons, especially in the start of a new league, because it is very easy to mess your character up. Now, there's a lot more forgivenesses in this game, in Path of Exile 2, than 1. I'll give him that. And we'll get to that in a little bit. But you don't want to try unless you've played thousands of hours of this game into going it alone. You don't want to go in blind and not know anything. And GGG knew they messed up. That's why they released the patch notes, I feel, less than 48 hours before Dawn of the Hunt released. And by the time I've gotten to recording here, and mind you, this is Monday. All right, this is like 3 days after launch. They've already nerfed the monster health. So the monster health that got increased, they already nerfed it. And in the first 48 hours, first 2 days, 7 or 8 hot fixes were done. And also, I noticed health flasks and mana flasks were going slower. Like, sometimes in PoE 2 and PoE 1, your health is definitely... You need a health potion, and you can... You know, and I like the way Path of Exile does it, and Path of Exile 2, your potions refill on enemy kills, but if I get hit, and the enemies hit hard, too, in Dawn of the Hunt, I need a health potion fast. I need that fast recovery. And there is no fast recovery. I didn't start getting good health potions that recovered very fast until I had beaten the campaign in normal. So it was a slog having, like, say, recover 200 health in 5 seconds. Well, when the monsters are hitting you lightning fast and we're mute, and we basically get sneezed on and we're stunned. Like, we're getting every single poison, stun, set on fire, chaos damaged. Everything is affecting us more because they also want the charm system to work. Look, the charm system isn't good. Okay? Just get rid of it. You tried your best. Maybe if it's on the belt and there was a easier way of describing how it works, because I do not know how it works. I do not know how they get recharged. I do not know anything about the charm system except that sometimes it works. And in this patch, they want us to use these charms. All right. So that means we're getting hit with every affliction that you can think of. Like, if we get looked at the wrong way, we get stunned. So now it's causing us to look at stun lock and stun thresholds on armor, on top of eventually having to look for fire resistance, chaos resistance, lightning resistance, cold resistance, while still getting our stats for our regular items, for our builds. So stun threshold has been created as a new stat line that we have to pay attention to as the players. With how unwelcomed this season has been so far for the vast majority, because I hear some positives, and we will get to the positives. There's some positives in this, but when a lot of the streamers, whose job it is to play this game, to play games online, to entertain a community out there, when they don't want to play it and they're not having fun and they want to switch immediately. One of the popular sentiments right now is Last Epoch shouldn't have delayed their season. Because had they launched when they were supposed to, which was the day before this, I think, before Dawn of the Hunt was supposed to launch, Last Epoch probably would have siphoned about 100,000 players from Path of Exile 2 that never would have come back to this season. Because that's how much ill will was generated towards it. I also feel like this launch is going to be studied in business classes as to what it looks like when you successfully ruin an early access game. An early access game that was very successful. To GGG's credit, they now are treating this almost as if it's released, like an official release. And it was only supposed to be a beta test. But they weren't anticipating almost a million people spending the $30 to get access. So, rough estimate, they made a lot of money when this game was released in early access. They would like nothing more than for people to retain and still play longer than the opening day weekend. And if you're out there like kind of wondering, how does this make sense? I will use sports for the sports analogies, okay? Make it easier. You're playing Madden, and you have like the best team ever, and you're consistently winning the Super Bowls in your franchises, okay? Say you go to bed, you wake up, you go to play Madden again, or you wait a week to play Madden again because you have a busy work week and whatnot, and you crank up that team, and you just kind of go in playing the next game, and you get blown out, and you don't know why. Nothing's working. Everything seems slower, but the enemy, but your opponent, but the opposing team seems faster. And then you go and look, and your guys are still like overall like the same. They haven't been touched, but they're catching power, they're catching strength, they're carrying ability, their catching ability, their tackling ability has all been halved. And you weren't told this. There was no pop-up that mentioned, hey, new patch came through. We've nerfed your speed, your ability to tackle, your ability to catch the ball, your ability to throw the ball, your ability to kick the ball. Everything has been halved for you on statistic, on the stats, on your power, on your overalls. But we never say your overall has been adjusted because it's the normal for you, but not for the opposing team. For my Magic the Gathering players out there, this would be the equivalent of, for the Commander players, the ban that got the ban that caused Wizards to unfortunately be in control of Commander, the Commander format. When Dockside, Mana Crypt, Nadu, and I forgot, and Jeweled Lotus were banned. This is the equivalent to that. Yeah, it wasn't well received. Everybody disliked that. But I will say, at least to Path of Exiles' credit and their fan base, they're not throwing death threats at the developers like the loudmouths that were the loudest of the fan base of the Commander fan base when those bans happened. I'm still salty about that, by the way. And to go back on about like no ability to theory craft, it's a detriment because most fans of Path of Exile and Path of Exile 2 are the 90% who barely make it to endgame, okay? And we rely on those build guys for an easier time to level in the campaign. Because remember, Path of Exile 1 and Path of Exile 2 are extremely complicated games. I will show you the Path of Exile 2. I will show you the Path of Exile 2 skill tree. And you get to put a point in one of these skills wherever you start on the tree per level and doing some side quest stuff in the game. This is the skill tree for Path of Exile 2. Do you see how massive it is? It's easy to mess this up. So now most of us are going in blind unless we waited till today to start playing. And even then, the build guides aren't really well developed. And you can say, yeah, you should just play the game as is. Dog, I challenge you to go play Path of Exile 1 blind and not look up a build guide. Never play the game before. I challenge you to do that. I did that when I finally started playing the game when it came out on console. I've been playing it on PC every now and again. I remember when I was playing on PC when there was only 2 or 3 acts in Path of Exile 1. But the PC I had at the time couldn't run it, so c'est la vie, go back to playing my Xbox, because I'm a console player by and by, and it came out on Xbox One. That's when I started playing it. That's when I started taking it a little bit more seriously. And my first playthrough was blind as an archer. I managed to beat the game. I managed to get to the end game, maps. I did get the first ascendancy. I was level 70 by this time. And I had to create a new character because I finally looked up a build guide and I did everything wrong. Everything wrong. From every point that I put in my skill tree. And it's a similar, not the same, but it's a similar size skill tree in Path of Exile 1. I screwed up everything, even from like equipment, even from like skills I was using. Going in blind is not an enjoyable experience. Another funny quote that I think popped on Rax's stream. Patch 0.2.0 is the only update where the players look forward to going back to work on Monday. And another comment, we'll get to this. Currency drops, i.e. the Exalt Orbs, Chaos Orbs, Divination Orbs, they're not dropping. In the first campaign, in my first playthrough of the campaign, I got 7 Exalt Orbs, which may seem like a lot. And all it does is just give another rare item another stat line, as long as it can has an empty stat line. All rare items can have at least 6 stat lines on it, like plus 22 to strength, plus 20, 3 and 3 of each style of ability of stat line. But also last season, Exalt was kind of like the main currency for most of the items, unless it was like the super high-end stuff, and those are Divination Orbs. I got a Divination Orb drop in my first playthrough, and I saved it, and somebody was offering to do the last 2 Ascendancy runs for a Divination Orb, and I did it. And it was the best decision I ever made, because I wasn't going to get past Trials of Sechamus and the other trials where it's like the 10 rounds. I'm not going to get through that. Unless I wait till very, very late game. But you need those Ascendancy points to actually get to very, very late game. So I was stuck in a bind, so I did that, and it was great. But they're not dropping. And the currency from last season to this season seems to have changed. Before, as I said, the base was Exalt Orbs into Divination Orbs for the more expensive. At the end, I think it was like 250. I'm rounding up. 250 Exalt Orbs for 1 Divination. So in the really super high end, max statted items that hardly ever drop or barely get crafted in the way Path of Exile 2 does crafting, items could go for like 5 to 50 to 100 Divination Orbs. The lower end stuff will go for exalts. But it seems like it's flipped. Exalt orbs are barely even listed in the auction website anymore. And not auction, but the trading website. And now it's chaos orbs, which I've not had a single chaos orb drop for me yet. I've also I only had 2 uniques drop for me as well this season, which in the chat that I was looking at the time, I was in town, just gearing up in chat. When does the uniques drop? The immediate comment right after that. That's the neat part. They don't. And they're right. I had 2 uniques, and I even farmed a couple bosses, like the Clear Veil boss, Brea. I tried farming her because that boss fight in the last season was a really good way to get at least a handful of uniques to try, maybe get crappy uniques to grind for chaos orbs. Nope, didn't happen. Grinding gear games, they are also well known for making the start of a season every now and again extremely hard. Like, instead of pumping up the numbers to 100%, they'll pump numbers up to 1,000. And just kind of sit on it for the weekend and see what happens. And sometimes it sticks. Sometimes they nail that landing, and sometimes you get what happens with Dawn of the Hunt, where universally it is hated. I feel they did, but this time, though, I feel way too much was done between the nerfs, the lack of information for the new skills and uniques, along with taking jewel sockets out of the passive tree. They took like half of the jewel sockets out of the passive tree as well. Like, between the massive nerfs, which was everything. Remember, everything got nerfed, from uniques to skills to gems to, everything that was in the last season got nerfed. Now we had the new stuff on top of the stuff that the nerfs that, mind you, most of us didn't know all these things were nerfed, which led to my minion build not making it past Act 2. It's also rumored that playtesters at GGG who tested this patch told the devs, do not release this. This is not fun. This is not fun in the slightest. You're going to get hated on for this. And the devs basically said, nah, we're good, release it anyway. They have rolled out hotfix after hotfix after hotfix. If you don't know what a hotfix is, that is fixing an error in live in-use software. Google told me this. And also, it's not considered a regular update. So you know how this is patch 0.2.0? Well, it'll, in their forums, it's 0.2.0 hotfix 1, hotfix 2, hotfix 6B, 6C, hotfix 7B, 7C, 7D, hotfix 8. Because it's fixing things that have critically gone wrong with the game. So I was going for Lich minions, which is a witch ascendancy. And then after 2 hours stuck on the Jamma fight, which is the end of Act 2 boss, I was stuck on this fight for 2 hours. Mind you, the boss fights as well took like 10 minutes on average. And I wouldn't immediately die in the Jamma fight either. It would be like I'd get to the second phase, get halfway done the second phase, and then just die. And I was minions, so my army of the dead was trying their best to fight Jamma. Then I was like, let me pull the trigger and switch classes, because you can do that a little easier in gold. You need gold in the game, so I had to grind the next 3 hours of Dreadnought maps to grind enough gold to basically undo the Lich class, the minions build, and go for an Essence Drain build. Essence Drain and Decrepify. No, let me see. It's Essence Drain, Contagion, Withering Presence, and Unearth. That's the build that I wound up doing. But basically it's Essence Drain. And that took hours because it requires a lot of gold to undo all those points. I literally had to undo like 30 points in my skill tree. And it's like 500-600 gold a skill tree. And I'm only in Act 2 normal, so there's not a lot of gold being dropped right now, especially in there. But after that, in total, it took me about 6 hours to beat the Act 2 boss. If we count the 2 hours it took me to fight the boss, and then the 3 hours that it took to respec into the Essence Drain. I've not regretted this choice at all. Till about 8 hours later, where they hot-fixed the minions and gave them more life and made them hit a little bit harder, but from what they described, I don't think it's enough to even salvage the minion build. And then here's the thing. Here's some positives. I've been getting a little frustrated with this season. Not going to lie. I've been AVGNing it a little bit. But then when I beat a boss, I get like super hyped. Like when I beat bosses in the axe, or like I get so hyped, I'm high-fiving myself. And then I realize I'm all alone in my bedroom. And maybe I should go touch grass. Because I'm hyped for a single-player game, basically. And these moments of excitement would be awesome. Like, I was trying my best and figuring out the boss mechanics again, which is a good thing. Figuring out the boss mechanics, it's challenging and it's rewarding until the JAMA fight in Act 2. The JAMA fight in Act 2 quite possibly almost is the dumbest boss fight I've had to encounter with the minion build. And I see it in the chat all the time, in-game chat. I'm not the only one, and I'm not the only build that's dealt with it, that dealt with the JAMA fight being hard. I beat JAMA, and I kind of just went to Act 3, paused for like an hour, and contemplated if I wanted to delete this game. So there's a positive and a negative to it. It's made me pay attention a lot. I usually, at the moment, I keep a ring in my inventory of each. Like my right-handed ring in the game is like kind of permanently there because it's a really good ring. The left-handed ring is there to buff up an element resistance that I'll need depending on the stage or the boss fight I'm about to happen. I also keep charms of each element as well, just to prepare for if I'm about to roll into a lightning area, like an area or a boss fight that uses a lot of lightning. I'll take the left-handed ring off from fire to lightning. It's making me pay attention and do all these type of things as well. And when I correctly guess the resistances, it feels good. But this also did happen after I respect. So I don't know if there's any correlation in between me enjoying the game, doing that, and just kind of like square pegging, a square block in a round hole and just trying to force it in. But the combat is super... I don't want to say the combat is super good because, as I said, it's trying. It's difficult. And not in a good way a lot of the times. What else has been good about... Because I want to be somewhat positive. I mean, the game looks beautiful when it runs. And it doesn't completely gray screen on me, which is done 3 times. That's the first time I've had that happen. When I've gone for exalted items in the trade website, that wasn't the minion build stuff that I needed. It's been pleasant. Like, you upgrade, obviously, by putting stuff for sale in your stash tabs, and people will say, hey, can I buy this for 1 exalt? And you invite them to your group, and then you do the trade, and then you both go your own separate ways. One made some money, another got an upgrade to their gear. That stuff is still awesome, and I think they should keep it the way it is, even if it is a little bit clunky. I'm kind of used to the clunkiness now. I don't think I can go any other way, because I was complaining last season about maybe we should, because it's not in-game. There's no in-game auction board, trade board anymore. I see why they did it, because it's not universal. It's not segmented into the Xbox, the PlayStation, and the PC, because PC would always have the better economies, because far less people played the PlayStation and Xbox versions. Now we're all together. We get the same economies, which is great. What's not great is when I was trying to upgrade my minion builds and people would list stuff for like an exalt orb, I'd whisper message them and I'd get ignored. I cannot say this more. If you're going to list an item in Path of Exile on the trade website, list it for what you're going to want to sell it for. Or, I don't know, put or best offer on there. Don't list items for Exalt Orb, get like 10 different messages, ignore all of them, and then jack the price up to what you think is better. Do a little bit of research on the item that you're about to sell. List it accordingly, because I'm tired of getting, tired of getting ignored in the trade when it comes to unique items. It probably could have made my life a little easier had I been able to get the minion chest, the minion armor pieces that I wanted, and not gotten ignored by everybody. But when I get like a rare wand and my current gear, all my current gear except for jewelry and my belt, I've gotten off of players that immediately responded when I direct messaged them for the rare gear. But the unique gear, nah, you're going to get ignored by everybody. And when the combat works great. I mean, the Essence Drain build has been phenomenal. I blasted through JAMA the first time after going through with Essence Drain. Blasted through the rest of Act 3 doing Essence Drain. Not blasted, but like had an easier time. Didn't die as much. Wasn't... Still get it. I would die when I got swarmed and got stun locked, because stunning is still a thing. Remember, folks, stun threshold, you're going to need to look at that stat as well. So my resistances are all kind of wonky right now. That's why I have to rely on the ring to do it, because I also have to carefully figure out stun thresholds. And then finally, like late last night, I think, early this morning, they posted on the forums what we are working on. And they are fixing a few things with the new class, some critical errors, along with mentioning that they already fixed, and also mentioning stuff they already fixed. But most of the worthless builds and gems aren't even getting addressed. They're fixing Huntress stuff. The ability to gain frenzy through parry. They're noticing people's not using parry, or they're noticing that the parry mechanic just doesn't work in this style of game. It works on when you're going up against 1 or 2 enemies at a time, not when you're getting swarmed by 5 to 10. Because what would happen is you parry it, and then you're supposed to get a frenzy charge that does more damage to the enemy that you just parried, but because you're swarmed, you attack something, and it's not the thing that you just parried. So, yeah. So, they're going to do something that lets you get frenzy charges for no parrying. They fixed player minion damage, but I don't think it was enough. They reverted the life and to the end game of last season. To last season, but trying to control the top end of it, but I still think it's a little too much. They fixed the monster life, the large player sizes. This is something that there's, especially towards the end in Act 3, there's a couple large maps. Some very large maps. And this is a point of contention with a lot of the players, because they've been saying large maps are just too stupid. They're reporting that feels like they're too large. Normally, when this is the case, the main reason is due to other concerns such as monster life or player damage being incorrect, or just the lack of entertaining content in the area. However, we are checking to see if there are any outliers that players are spending too long in, and see if any changes to the area size need to happen. It's just some of your maps are too big. And so, like, I like the diversity of the maps too, because there's some small maps, there's some big maps, there's a lot of medium-sized maps, but towards the end of the game is where it's all backlogged with the big maps, especially towards the end of Act 3. Exiles map and the last like 3 or 4 maps are just monstrous, that you not only can get lost in, but if you take the wrong way, there's going to be nothing there but a dead end. But you're not going to realize that till 15 minutes of insane combat later, and Lord forbid you die, because for some reason when you respawn, everything respawns, enemies included. I don't know what Brainiac thought that was a good thing that's due and not changing this patch, but apparently it's still sticking around, that if you die and you respawn, all the enemies respawn. That don't make any sense to me still. Somebody explain it to me. They're fixing crashes and disconnects, or are continuing to fix them. Quality of life features, working on a few extra features that should be released relatively soon. First one is adding a system for bookmarking locations on your Atlas map. Nobody asked for this. Another is adding stash tab affinities for more items, including socketables and tablets. Nobody asked for this. And another is adding a way to rebind specters and tame beasts so that you can experiment with these options more easily. People asked for this, but a lot of the stuff that they're saying they're working on is stuff that needs to be worked on, but they need to work on more than just the stuff that they said in this. So the thing I've seen the most is with the Warrior. Warrior was considered the worst class last league by far, and now it's like they've risen above because so much has been nerfed in that time that the basic attack for a Warrior and the basic movement tech for a Warrior screen clears better than every other class, except for the Huntress Whirlwind, which was apparently broken and was fixed immediately upon discovery. I get why it was fixed. There's an ability to get like 10 different whirlwinds, tornadoes out there, and the math was not mathing where it was supposed to be like incremental increases to damage. Instead it was 50%, 100%, 150, 200, 300, 400, 500% damage. That wasn't the way it was intended. We all know that, especially if you look at the math that they presented. Yeah, that's a fine fix. That's a broken fix. But fix everything else so people who had starter builds in mind can actually play them. I still do like playing this game upon everything that I've been not raging about, but like quietly displeased, if you will. I've seen people and compilations of people acting childish. That's the nature of the game, though, especially online presence. Jeff from the former Rooster team said it the best. Unfortunately, the loudest voices are heard. So now you have to be louder to be heard. and louder and louder and louder until eventually everyone is screaming at each other. Well, when it comes to this, you have to be more outrageous and more outrageous and more outrageous and more outrageous. So eventually you're screaming at the top of your lungs, wailing in discontent, saying GGG is done. They are the most horrible human beings on the planet, and you're doing it for views. I get it. I fell into that trap 10 years ago too on YouTube. I get it. The opinions that they've all said have been justified. I'm not even going to say that because this is a universally hated patch and season right now. I just figured I honestly was going into this with saying, yes, there's a lot of negatives around this patch, but let me get some positives out the way. And there was very few positives, come to think of it. I think this is like my come to Jesus moment here where I realize maybe I should stop playing Path of Exile too. I'm going to load it back up as soon as I'm done this. All right. I think I'm either going to talk about Tarkir, Dragonstorm, or the cheater that got banned for NGR Gaming for Life. Back to you, future Dom. So yeah, my overall impressions of Path of Exile 2, the first 3-4 days of Dawn of the Hunt has been, it does some great things, but does so many things wrong that, yeah, it's there. I've almost deleted the game. I've almost stopped playing twice. Didn't delete the game. I'm not going to delete the game. But I almost went and played, in chat, somebody was like, Minecraft's I heard is easy and chill. And I almost did because I needed to come down because I was just like, especially after that JAMA fight in Act 2, and it took me that long to respec and then finally win the fight. I was like, you know what? I just don't want to think. I don't even want to play a violent game. Let me just go into Minecraft on peaceful and just build. I almost did. I'm not going to lie. But yeah, this weekend is official release of Tarkir, and it's going to be fun. And I hope you do have fun as well on drafts. And if you have a limited, that still happens. I know this place I played at for pre-release ran out of pre-release kits. They're drowning in Aether Drift kits, but they ran out of pre-release kits. So what does that tell you about it? I love Dragons of Tarkir. No, I've said it again. It's not Dragons of Tarkir. That was 10 years ago. Tarkir Dragonstorm is a phenomenal set. Kind of back to the basics, if you will. We're not doing a crazy Outlaws of the Midwest. We're not doing a spooky 80s movie in Magic the Gathering. We're not doing Death Race 2000. Good movie, by the way. We're back to dragons. We're back to, mythical high fantasy, I guess. But my name is Dom Douglas, here for Max Heroes and Villains YouTube channel. And may your top deck always be mythic. Nothing to say. It's just the Path of Exile 0.2.0. Swing and a miss.